Well, we don't have a date for the Voice referendum, but certainly we're starting to focus the mind. We have pamphlets on voting yes and no. They were released yesterday. The No Camp using its campaign to tell people if you don't know, don't vote no. While the yes side is calling on voters to unite the nation. The Prime Minister was on Ben Fordham's 2GB program this morning.
Don't risk the very important recognition in the Constitution for Indigenous Australians by getting it tied up with the Voice. When you have a look at those numbers, it's falling through the floor. So why not use your power as Prime Minister? You won the election. No. Legislate the Voice and let us vote on recognition, and Australia will overwhelmingly say yes any day of the week.
Will they, Ben? Will they, Ben?
Yes.
Because the former government had the opportunity.
No, talk about now. Yes, they will.
Joining me live now is Cape York Indigenous leader and Uluru Statement architect Noel Pearson. He's here in the studio with me. Noel, great to see you. We've all seen those polls. Some of them can just simply go in the bin. I don't know what they're based on, but it is showing a trend. How worried are you about that at this stage?
No, I'm quite comfortable with where we're at. The main poll will be the last one, and I'm working towards that along with my colleagues on the Yes campaign. We're in a very good position to have that conversation for the next 3 months, and it's our duty and our job to persuade a great swathe of people.
Let me get that. Let me get that. This is the beauty of live television, Noel.
Okay, thank you. It's our job to persuade the great swathe of people in the middle of Australia, up to 30 or 40% who haven't thought about this yet or are up for grabs.
And you've been doing that as you travel around the country. You've been out of this kind of political bubble that we've been in. And what are people telling you?
And they're telling me things contrary to the polls. In fact, I had a very, almost to the last person, boomer audience in Tasmania, and it was very enthusiastic. I spent some time in the mall with Bridget Archer, the Liberal member, but also Senator Anne Urquhart at a Politics in the Pub event. And these events were largely older people and very anxious that we get the result right in October, very supportive of the campaign. And I'm feeling real good. I started in the Sunshine Coast, went down to a blustery, windy, cold Tasmania. Yep. And I've just come back from Newcastle, spending 2-3 days there with the Catholic Diocese and other supporters in the region. I'm getting a really good sense of where Australians are at with this.
You've been a leader in this space for decades.
Yeah.
You've always worked hard, but I haven't seen you work this hard ever. You are leaving nothing to chance here. Noel, if you can just explain why this is so important to you, why you're so inflexible, and why you think this model is actually going to change people's lives, your people.
One of the examples that really resonated with the audiences I've spoken to, particularly in these recent days in Newcastle, was the example of rheumatic heart disease. Now, lunchtime today, I'm going to meet once again the owner of Zambrero, the restaurant chain.
I do.
He's a Canberra boy who's made $1 billion enterprise, while he was at uni. He has a charity called One Disease at a Time. Tackle one disease, eradicate it. And the one disease he's focused his charity on is rheumatic heart disease, which afflicts young children. You get a fever, for a short while, and then your heart is damaged irreparably for the rest of your life. And if you don't attend to it very, very carefully, you'll drop dead in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and sometimes in your teens. That's a disease that only exists in Aboriginal Australia. It used to exist amongst white fellas, back in the 1920s and 30s, but no longer. You'd have to go to Bangladesh or India to find this same disease, rheumatic heart disease. Now, I checked the speeches of our politicians over the last 20, 30 years to see when has rheumatic heart disease ever been mentioned in the Parliament. Zero. And this is where the voice has got to bring the game to the politicians and say, guys, we need an action plan. Sam Prince, the owner of Zambrero, he's been 10 years at it. They've worked out a way of tackling in communities in Arnhem Land a kind of full court press on rheumatic heart disease. And what we need is a voice to press this issue with the Parliament so that we can eradicate this disease in Australia. It's an absolutely tragic disease. It only applies to Aboriginal children, and other countries in the world have got rid of it. We can too.
The concerns raised by the No camp, let's describe them that way, are that if this doesn't work, we're stuck with it in our constitution. What do you say to that?
Well, it will work. Whenever has public policy not benefited from the voices of the community it's directed at? You know, you're going to make policies about those people there. You're going to have better policy, better law, if those people have a role in telling you, as the lawmaker, the parliamentarians as the lawmakers, telling you their views on subjects. This is all a good thing. There's no need for a fear campaign about this. The provision that we will vote on in later this year is very straightforward. One of the things that emerged from my talks with people in these last 2 weeks around the countryside, I take them through the actual provision that Albanese has proposed. First, recognition. First line is about recognition. Recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first peoples of Australia. 2, the guarantee. What's the guarantee? There shall be a voice. 3, what is the purpose of the voice? Well, the purpose is to make representation to the Parliament and to the government on matters affecting Aboriginal people. And the 4th part of the provision says, it answers the question, what's the detail? And you know what it says? It says, the Parliament shall have the power to decide what functions, powers and procedures the voice will have.
It's an advisory body.
Parliament
does not trump the body. And what about the words that the No camp has used from the Yes camp against itself? And I want to bring up 2 issues, that this will lead to treaty, and this is the first steps towards treaty. The other, that, you know, this is a body that could advise the RBA. Those are the 2 things that seem to be concerning people. And they're coming from those who want to see this get up. Is that just the wrong message?
I can't comment on the No campaign assertions in their pamphlet. I see Professor Craven in the papers today rejecting their quotation of him. That's a matter for the No campaign to answer.
Apoplectic, he said.
He was apoplectic about it. And I have a great regard for Greg Craven. He is a central reason why we're talking about a voice today. You know, back in 2014, I took a taxi ride from centre of Sydney across the Harbour Bridge over to the Australian Catholic University to have a meeting with Greg Craven. I've taken his advice for 10 years on this subject. He's an eminent guy and he should be taken seriously. I think Greg has identified the core of this thing. He says that it's a moral question. This question about recognition is a moral question, and Australians will face a moral question in this referendum. But in relation to this job...
Can I just extrapolate that for a moment? Yeah. A moral question. What do you mean by that? Do you want Australians to look in their hearts?
It's about our hearts. You know, obsessing about where's the detail and so on. Well, actually, as I answered before, the detail is up to the Parliament.
Yeah.
Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese have an equal role in determining the detail, as will...
And who is on the body.
And who is on the body. That's a question for Senator Hanson, Senator Price, you know, Labor, Liberal, Greens. whoever makes up the parliament, they're the people who will decide the
Yeah, so
details.
this puts to bed that argument that this constitutional change means that the parliament won't have control over policy. That's absolutely not right.
Absolutely not right.
Yeah.
You just, like I said, I went around Newcastle on the weekend, and the most powerful explanation I could provide is just to read the provision.
Yeah.
You get people to focus on the words of the provision. It's easy to understand, by the way. It's plain English, and so I'm feeling around the countryside that there's this is a warming agenda. This agenda is going to warm over the next 3 months, and I'm very sanguine about where we're at.
I wouldn't describe you as elite, but some might. That's a compliment, by the way, in the context of this debate. But I think a lot of people assume that you would seek to be on this advisory body. Is that the correct assumption?
No. I've been at work in Cape York for 30 years. During that time, we have cultivated a second layer of leadership and a third layer of leadership and fourth, being our kids at school, right? Where we've deliberately cultivated a leadership that talks in the same way, thinks in the same way. We're out to restore the responsibility of our people, to restore the rights of our people, to get those two things in balance. And I just, in Cape York, we now have, we're just so blessed. The next layer of leadership, by the way, is filled with young women, who've come through our ranks or gone out into the wider world and now are coming back, skilled and experienced. So they're the generation who are going to make this thing work. The ones who are going to make the voice work are the ones that we put through high school to year 12 and who've gone on to university, completed their degrees. They're the leadership of the future.
Noel Pearson is still a leader. I think you've still got a couple of decades left in you. Well, it's great to talk to you this morning. We will speak again. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Laura Jace.